What would you do if you were 65 years old, broke, alone, and everyone around you believed your life was already over? What if you had failed not once, not 10 times, but hundreds of times? What if every door closed? What if every person told you the same thing? No. Would you keep going? Would you still believe that your greatest success was still ahead of you? Because one man did, and that's why the entire world knows his face. Not because he was born rich, not because he was lucky, not because success came easily, but because he refused to give up. His name was Harland David Sanders, but the world remembers him by another name, Colonel Sanders. And his story isn't really about fried chicken. It's about one of the greatest comeback stories in human history. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that you're starting over again, at an age when most people are thinking about retirement, at an age when society tells you your best years are behind you. Could you do it? Because Colonel Sanders did. Harland David Sanders was born in 1890 in rural Indiana, and from the very beginning, life was difficult. When Harland was only 6 years old, his father died. Imagine that, a little boy, too young to understand why his father wasn't coming home, too young to understand that his childhood had just ended. His mother had to work long hours to support the family, and so at an age when most children were playing games, Harland learned something that would change his life forever. He learned how to cook. Think about that. One of the world's most famous food entrepreneurs began cooking not because he wanted to become rich, but because he had no choice. Sometimes the skills that eventually change our lives are born from our greatest struggles. Harland cooked for his younger siblings. He learned how to prepare meals. He learned patience. He learned responsibility. And perhaps most importantly, he learned resilience. But life wasn't finished testing him. As he grew older, Harland drifted from one job to another. He worked on farms. He worked as a streetcar conductor. He worked as a railroad fireman. He sold insurance. He did whatever he could to survive. Have you ever felt like everyone else had a plan except you? Like everyone else was moving forward while you were simply trying to keep up? That was Harland Sanders. He wasn't building an empire. He wasn't becoming wealthy. He was surviving, and survival can be exhausting. Over the years, he experienced failure after failure. He lost jobs, he struggled financially, he faced disappointment after disappointment. Most people would have accepted defeat. Most people would have stopped believing that something extraordinary was possible. But Harland Sanders never stopped working, never stopped trying, never stopped hoping. And then something happened. He opened a small service station in Kentucky. Not a restaurant, not an empire, just a small business. And while serving travelers, Harland began doing something that felt familiar. He started cooking. Not because he wanted fame, not because he wanted success, because he loved it. He cooked fried chicken, simple, delicious, comforting. And something unexpected happened. People loved it, really loved it. Travelers returned, word spread, customers kept coming back. For the first time in his life, Harland Sanders wasn't just surviving, he was building something meaningful, something special. Could this finally be the opportunity he had spent his entire life searching for? Perhaps. But life had one more devastating lesson waiting for him, and that lesson would destroy almost everything he had built. Imagine spending your entire life searching for one opportunity, one chance, one breakthrough, and just when you finally believe you found it, everything falls apart. Would you survive it? Because that's exactly what happened to Harland Sanders. By the 1930s and 1940s, the small service station he operated in Kentucky had become something much bigger. People weren't just stopping for gas anymore. They were stopping for his food, especially his fried chicken. Travelers would drive for miles just to taste it. Think about that. The man who had spent decades failing at one job after another had finally discovered something he was truly exceptional at: cooking. And for the first time in his life, success seemed possible. Harland expanded. He opened a restaurant. Business grew. Customers returned again and again. He perfected his famous recipe, 11 herbs and spices, a secret formula that would eventually become one of the most recognized recipes in the world. Can you imagine how that must have felt? After decades of struggle, after years of uncertainty, to finally believe that your future was secure. Perhaps Harland thought the hardest part of his life was over, but he was wrong. Because sometimes life tests us most severely just before our greatest breakthrough. Then something unbelievable happened. The government announced the construction of a new interstate highway. At first, that might not sound important, but for Harland Sanders, it changed everything. The new highway redirected traffic. The travelers stopped coming. The customers disappeared. The business he had spent years building slowly collapsed. Imagine standing inside a restaurant that was once full of life. Now it's quiet. The tables are empty. The kitchen is silent. And you realize that everything you've worked for is disappearing. What would you do? Would you fight? Would you surrender? Would you accept that your dream had failed? Harland Sanders was forced to sell his business. Think about that moment. A man who had spent decades chasing success. A man who had finally found it. Now losing everything again. And perhaps the cruelest part of all, he was 65 years old. 65, at an age when most people retire, at an age when society tells you your journey is over. Harland Sanders was starting from zero again. Can you imagine that feeling? No successful business, no fortune, no security, no guarantee that tomorrow would be any better. Only one thing remained: his fried chicken recipe. And sometimes one thing is enough. Most people would have given up. Most people would have accepted defeat. Most people would have looked at their age and believed the world was right. But Harland Sanders made a decision that would change history. He refused to quit. Instead of retiring, he decided to travel across America. Not as a successful businessman, not as a wealthy entrepreneur, but as an old man with a recipe and a dream. Imagine getting into your car at age 65, knowing that almost everyone thinks you're too old, too late, too unsuccessful, and then deciding to prove them all wrong. That's exactly what Harland Sanders did. He drove from restaurant to restaurant, town to town, city to city. He walked into restaurants carrying his secret recipe. He asked owners one simple question: "Would you like to sell my fried chicken?" And then
He waited for someone, anyone, to believe in him. But the world had one more lesson waiting for Harlan Sanders, because the rejections are about to begin. And not just one, not 10, not 100, more than 1,000. To be continued.
How many times can a person hear the word no before they stop believing? 5 times? 10 times? 50 times? What if the world rejected you 100 times? Would you continue? Because at 65 years old, with very little money and no successful business left, Harlan Sanders began one of the most extraordinary journeys in history. He got into his car, he packed his pressure cooker, he carried his secret fried chicken recipe, and he started driving. From restaurant to restaurant, from city to city, from state to state. Imagine that, an elderly man traveling across America, sleeping in his car, walking into restaurants owned by strangers, asking for one chance, just one. And most of the time, the answer was the same. No. No, we're not interested. No, your recipe won't work. No, nobody will buy it. No, again and again and again. Can you imagine hearing those words every day? Can you imagine believing in something when nobody else does? Because that's exactly what Harlan Sanders experienced. He wasn't rejected once. He wasn't rejected a dozen times. According to the popular story associated with his life, he faced over 1,000 rejections before finding success. Think about that. More than 1,000 moments where someone looked at his dream and said no. Most people don't fail because they aren't talented. They fail because they stop trying. But Harlan Sanders had already spent his entire life learning how to survive failure. He had lost jobs, he had lost businesses, he had lost opportunities, and every loss had taught him one lesson: keep going. Imagine driving through the night, sleeping in your car because you can't afford a hotel, waking up the next morning, putting on your white suit, smiling, and walking into another restaurant, knowing there's a very good chance you'll hear no again. Would you do it? Would you still believe? Harlan Sanders did. Day after day, week after week, month after month. He cooked his chicken for restaurant owners. He explained his recipe. He offered a simple business arrangement, and then he waited. Usually the answer was rejection, but then something unbelievable happened. One restaurant owner said yes, just one. Think about that moment. After hundreds of disappointments, after countless miles, after endless rejection, one person believed. And sometimes one person is all it takes to change your life. That first agreement wasn't worth millions of dollars. It wasn't a global empire. It wasn't fame. It was something much more important: hope. For the first time in a long time, Harlan Sanders had proof that his dream wasn't impossible. And that changed everything. Because hope creates momentum, and momentum creates belief. Soon, another restaurant joined, then another, then another. Slowly, very slowly, the impossible began to happen. People loved the chicken. Customers returned. Restaurant owners made money. Word spread. The old man with the white suit and the secret recipe was becoming impossible to ignore. Have you ever noticed that success rarely happens overnight. What people call an overnight success is often the result of decades of struggle that nobody saw. People would eventually see Colonel Sanders as an icon, a legend, a business genius, but they didn't see the years of failure. They didn't see the nights he slept in his car. They didn't see the moments when he wondered if everyone else was right. And perhaps that's why his story matters. Because greatness doesn't begin when the world believes in you. Greatness begins when you continue believing in yourself. But the most extraordinary chapter of Harlan Sanders' life was still ahead. Because the old man who had been rejected more than 1,000 times was about to build one of the most recognizable brands in human history. To be continued.
Imagine spending your entire life being told you're too old, too late, too unsuccessful. And then, suddenly, everything changes. That's exactly what happened to Colonel Sanders. After years of rejection, after sleeping in his car, after driving thousands of miles across America, his dream finally began to grow. One restaurant became 2, 2 became 10, 10 became hundreds. The old man that nobody believed in was building something extraordinary. And the most remarkable part? He wasn't in his 20s, he wasn't in his 30s, he wasn't even in his 40s, he was in his 60s. Think about that. At an age when most people stop dreaming, Colonel Sanders was just getting started. Have you ever told yourself that you're too late, too old, too far behind? Colonel Sanders would probably smile and tell you something very simple. It's never too late. As more restaurants joined his franchise system, something incredible happened. The white suit became famous, the glasses became famous, the goatee became famous, and soon the man himself became the brand. People didn't just buy fried chicken, they bought a story of persistence, a story of hope, a story that said, if this man can succeed after a lifetime of failure, maybe I can too. That's the power of a great story. It doesn't just sell products, it changes beliefs. And Colonel Sanders understood that better than almost anyone. Then something happened that changed his life forever. Kentucky Fried Chicken exploded. Restaurants opened across America, then around the world. The same recipe that thousands of people had rejected became one of the most famous recipes in history. Can you imagine what that must have felt like, to remember every rejection, every failure, every person who told you to quit, and then watch the entire world line up to buy what they once ignored? Sometimes success isn't about proving yourself right. Sometimes it's about proving that persistence works. By the early 1960s, Kentucky Fried Chicken had become a massive success. The company had grown to hundreds of franchise locations. Colonel Sanders had become one of the most recognizable businessmen in America. And yet, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the struggle. He never forgot the fear. Because once you've lost everything, you never forget what it felt like. In 1964, at the age of 73, Colonel Sanders made another extraordinary decision. He sold Kentucky Fried Chicken for $2 million. $2 million. Today, that number might not sound unbelievable, but in 1964, it was life-changing. Think about that moment. A man who once slept in his car, a man who had been rejected more than 1,000 times, a man who started over at 65, had built one of the most successful food businesses in history. But here's what makes Colonel Sanders different from so many other success stories. He didn't retire. He didn't disappear. He continued traveling, continued inspiring, continued sharing his story, because he understood something profound. Success isn't just about what you build, it's about what you inspire others to build. And perhaps that's why even today, decades after his death, billions of people still recognize his face, not because he sold chicken, but because he sold hope. And maybe that's the greatest business lesson ever taught. But Colonel Sanders' greatest legacy wasn't KFC. It was something much more powerful, a message for anyone who believes it's too late. And that message would outlive him forever. To be continued.
What is the real definition of success? Is it money? Is it fame? Is it building a company that millions of people recognize? Or is it something much deeper? Because if there's one person who understood the true meaning of success, it was Colonel Sanders. After selling Kentucky Fried Chicken in 1964, most people expected him to retire. After all, he was already in his 70s. He had become wealthy. He had achieved what most people spend their entire lives chasing. He had won. But Colonel Sanders didn't see it that way, because he had never been fighting for money. He had been fighting for purpose. Imagine spending your entire life searching for something, failing, trying again, failing again, and then finally discovering the one thing you were meant to do. Would you walk away from it? Colonel Sanders couldn't. And so, even after selling KFC, he continued traveling. He visited restaurants. He met customers. He shook hands with strangers. He smiled for photographs. And everywhere he went, he carried something much more valuable than his famous chicken recipe. He carried hope. Think about that. Millions of people didn't see Colonel Sanders as a businessman. They saw him as proof that failure isn't permanent, proof that age doesn't define your future, proof that one decision can change everything. Have you ever told yourself that you're too late, too old, too far behind? Colonel Sanders spent most of his life hearing those same words, and yet he built his empire after the age of 65, not before, after. That's what makes his story extraordinary, because it destroys one of the biggest lies people tell themselves, the lie that says, "My chance has already passed." No, your chance hasn't passed. You may simply not have reached your moment yet. Colonel Sanders often appeared happy, confident, successful, but behind every smile was a lifetime of struggle. The death of his father, years of poverty, failed businesses, lost jobs, rejection after rejection. And perhaps that's why his success felt so powerful, because he earned every single part of it. Nothing was given to him. Everything was fought for. And maybe that's why people around the world continue to admire him today. Not because he created fried chicken, but because he refused to surrender. Imagine if Colonel Sanders had quit at 50. Imagine if he had quit at 60. Imagine if he had looked at his age and decided that life was over. There would be no KFC, no global empire,
no white suit, no legendary story. And millions of people would never have learned one of the greatest lessons ever taught. The lesson that success doesn't belong to the young. It doesn't belong to the talented. It doesn't belong to the lucky. Success belongs to those who continue, those who endure, those who refuse to stop believing. Because every successful person eventually arrives at the same moment, the moment when quitting seems reasonable. And the people who become legends are the people who decide to continue anyway. Colonel Sanders didn't become a legend because he never failed. He became a legend because failure never defeated him. And perhaps that's the real secret behind every extraordinary success story.
What if I told you that the greatest obstacle standing between you and success isn't failure? It isn't rejection. It isn't age. It's the moment you decide to stop trying. Because that's the lesson Colonel Sanders spent his entire life teaching the world. Today, billions of people recognize his face, the white suit, the black string tie, the smile, the glasses. For most people, it's simply the logo of a famous restaurant. But behind that face is one of the greatest stories of persistence ever told. A little boy who lost his father, a young man who failed at countless jobs, an entrepreneur who lost his business, an old man who started over at 65, and a legend who refused to accept that his story was over. Think about that. Colonel Sanders didn't become successful because life was fair. Life wasn't fair. He didn't become successful because everything worked out perfectly. Nothing worked out perfectly. He became successful because every time life knocked him down, he made a decision to stand up again and again and again. Have you ever noticed that the world loves success stories, but we often ignore the years of struggle that created them? We celebrate the empire, but we forget the pain. We admire the victory, but we overlook the sacrifice. The truth is, every great success story is built on moments when quitting would have been easier. Colonel Sanders experienced those moments more than most people. Imagine sleeping in your car. Imagine hearing no hundreds of times. Imagine watching your dream fail, and then imagine believing anyway. That's not business, that's courage. And perhaps courage is the real secret behind every empire ever built. Today, Kentucky Fried Chicken operates in countries all over the world. Millions of people eat KFC every single day. But perhaps Colonel Sanders' greatest achievement wasn't building a global brand. Perhaps it was proving something that millions of people desperately need to hear. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not too broken, and your failures do not define your future. Because if a man could lose everything, start over at 65, face more than 1,000 rejections, and still build one of the world's most recognizable brands, then what might be possible for you? What dream have you given up on? What goal have you convinced yourself is impossible? What story have you already decided will never happen? Maybe it's time to reconsider. Maybe your greatest opportunity is still waiting. Maybe your biggest failure is preparing you for your greatest success. And maybe,
just maybe, your story hasn't even started yet. Colonel Sanders once stood where many people stand today, confused, afraid, rejected, alone. But he kept going, and that's why the world remembers him. Not because he sold fried chicken, but because he proved that persistence can change a life. So if you're struggling right now, if you've been rejected, if you've failed, if you're wondering whether it's too late, remember the old man in the white suit. Remember the man who refused to quit. Remember the man who built an empire after 65. Because every success story begins with a decision to continue. Every billionaire, every empire, every legend started from zero. And perhaps your greatest chapter has not been written yet.